hey, it's Wes, and today it's time to talk about the new Kolari IR-ND neutral density filters. So what is it? Let's have a look. Although the term neutral density filter does mean something very specific, that the filter is going to be neutral, filters aren't always completely neutral. There is only a certain smaller subset of filters that are truly color neutral. And these Kolari filters aim to hit that mark, not only in regular light, but also in infrared light. Now, I will say right up front, I don't have any infrared converted cameras. I tried to find someone around here who did, and I could not. So unfortunately, I cannot test the infrared side of this, but what I can test is the regular visual spectrum. And oh boy, will we ever. Starting out, however, with the build quality and handling. These filters come in a nice, solid, magnetically closing case, which is good. However, the case itself is a little bit slippery. Now, why would that matter much, you might ask? Well, if we go so far as to look at the Peter McKinnon ND filters, they come with a nice, grippy, knurly case itself, so it's hard to drop the case. This is important because, yes, I went out to do some nature photography with these. My hands were very cold and very dry, and I found these very hard to hold on to. So that is a bit of a minus. Filters themselves are made of brass rings, which is the best. They're great for screwing in and on, they don't get stuck as easily, and they have a nice grip and texture to them. The sides are knurled, however there are gaps where there is text on the sides, and those parts are reasonably slippery. They're not very grippy at all, but the knurled part is nice. Not perfect, but very good. The case itself, and this is a personal nitpick of mine, does not have room for a step ring. Some ND cases do, some don't. Obviously manufacturers aren't really thinking of this when they make the cases, but generally speaking, I get all my rings in 82 millimeters, then I put a step ring on it, and you can't close the case on top of it. Again, some do, some don't. You can't with this one. The filters themselves, instead of using shot glass, which is considered the usual for high quality, they're using Gorilla Glass, which you might remember from such things as your cell phone. What are the advantages of that? Well, number one, they're more scratch resistant, more break resistant, and supposedly they have a lower refractive index, which will give you better clarity, less reflections, in certain situations. Is that how it's going to work out? Well, we'll find out. So overall, it's a very solid build. Just lose a tiny bit on the case and the handling. It's going to be a good 9 out of 10. Next up, let's test the flaring. So we're going to be comparing these against the Freewell ND filter, which is a solid value ND filter, high value, very good performance, and of course, no filter at all. And here I have the 10-stop and the 5-stop from Kolari. I turned on as many lights as I could for this, but the 10-stop is going to be suffering from some extensive ISO noise, unfortunately, in these tests, because I'm testing it wide open at f2.8, as well as stop down to f5. As you can see, it is very difficult to tell the difference between these filters and no filter at all. Extremely good performance. I was very impressed. I'm testing this on the Sony 16-35 G Master lens. It's not the most flare resistant, but it's pretty solid. Why I did test it on that is because it's my best 82mm native filter thread. As soon as you put a step ring on a filter, you're introducing more space between the front element and the filter, and so the filter can no longer really be held responsible for any increased flaring or reflections. So I need to give this the benefit of the doubt and put it right on an 82mm filtered lens. If you look really closely, unfortunately you are still getting the dreaded green blob. Not bad, not super bright, and it's very small, but it's still there, the mark of an ND filter, always the case. So overall, I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10 for flaring. I don't know if it's possible to get rid of that green blob. I've never seen it done though. Only appears in some circumstances though. Sharpness. I found the most detailed thing I could. It was a painting. It has very fine grain. Then I took the sharpest lens that I have, the 90mm macro, stopped it down to its sharpest setting at f5, used my sharpest camera, the A7 Mark III. Only 24 megapixels you might say, but it has a very weak anti-aliasing filter. So also very sharp. Unfortunately, I don't have like an A7R4 to test this on, but what I can tell you is you have a clear degradation in the resolution when looking ultra pixel peeping with the Freewell, which I consider to be a very sharp filter in and of itself. I cannot tell the difference between these filters and the filterless version on a 24 megapixel body. I just can't. For my methodology, I put a camera on a tripod, used a remote trigger, even though my shutter speed for the most part was high enough that it wasn't always necessary. And so both of these filters, if you can get controlled circumstances to obviously have a stable enough camera, they are not robbing you of any sharpness. That's amazing. So for sharpness, that's an easy 10 out of 10 for me. Color accuracy. That's where things get difficult. Because as sharp as an ND filter might be, for some reason, they all color the image just a little bit. It's just generally accepted. You put an ND filter on your camera, then you just do another white balance or use auto white balance to compensate for that. I had so much light going on, I had lights pointing at the camera, at the subject, and when I did my flaring tests, and when I did my outdoor photography, I'm not saying that there is absolutely no coloration, because there is the ever so slightest coloration. But let me tell you, this is not the kind of coloration that you're going to try to get rid of by doing a white balance on your camera or a gray card. No, it's way smaller than that. You're going to have the exact same white balance or gray card measurement. I tried this over and over. It always comes out the same as with or without the filter on. This one, you have to get right in there and take specific RGB level settings side by side, and even then, it's generally only off by 1 or 2 out of 256. So, yes, there is a coloration. To be perfectly frank, it's completely irrelevant because it's clear enough that it just doesn't matter at all. For color accuracy, I have to give this a 9.5 out of 10. No, it's not utterly transparent under the strictest of scientific measurements. However, I can't see it getting any better than that. Value. We've got some high standards here. This is shooting for absolute neutrality, whereas a lot of ND filters, they're called neutral density, but they're not truly neutral. This one is aiming for absolute true neutrality. So that bar is set. The Freewell filter we tested against, about $100 for an 82mm filter thread. The Kolari is $160. Seems like a lot of money, but when we go up against the other filters that do boast specifically true neutrality, we have the Breakthrough Photography X4 is $190. The B&W MRC Nano, $200. And the Hoya is $160. So of all the ND filters that will actually potentially give you neutrality, this is the lowest price that you're going to pay. Some people prefer their ND filters to remove that IR spectrum because they see it as contaminating the light going to their sensor. Now, in response to that, I do have to say, most cameras these days, especially mirrorless cameras, have an infrared blocking filter on their sensor to begin with, and you actually have to remove that filter just to take infrared photos. So it's not really that important to block out infrared light these days. So we have infrared transmissibility and true neutrality. So although this isn't the lowest priced, it is among the lowest priced for that thing. So I have to give this a 9 out of 10 for value. Yes, it's an expensive filter, but if you pay less, you will get less. So that gives us a total of 46.5 out of 50, and that is an extremely strong score. I did not expect that. When I first got these filters, I was like, oh boy, these are expensive. But you've got scratch resistance, you've got true neutrality, you've got a brass ring. It's pretty much everything that you want. Obviously, you can get a filter for less, but you cannot get a true neutral filter for much less than this. So there you have it. If you have any questions about the Kolari neutral density filter, let me know down in the comments below and I'll get back to you. If you have any suggestions for what we should be looking at next, again, let me know down there. We'll talk about that. But until next time, let's go take some neutral photos.